All right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome. Appreciate you coming out here on a Friday night. My name is Bruce Patton. I'm the curator here at Savoy. And hopefully you are all here for the automotive forensic photography, right? Okay, good. You're in the right place. So I'd like to go ahead and mention, hopefully you guys got to see some of our current exhibitions that were out there. If not, we'll be open till 9 o'clock tonight so you can take a look at them. But hopefully you saw the Prominent Packards, the Savoy Survivors, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Museum vehicles out there, and the Moonshine Runners, and of course our Savoy collection cars. Also wanted to mention what's kind of coming up next. So at the end of September, 1st of October, we'll be pulling out the cars out of the Great Hall. And we got part 2 of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Museum. That one's actually going to be called Winners Through the Decades. So we're actually going to have actual Indianapolis Motor Speedway winners through the decades that we'll be borrowing. And I think it's middle of November, we'll actually have the Marmon Wasp here. So the very first winner of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. He has plans, so he can't be here right as soon as we open because he has to be at another event. But we'll be bringing him in later. So just so you know. And then actually we're going to have a supercar exhibit starting in November, and then we're going to do Japanese collectible cars in December. So that's our highlights for this year. Let's see, the movies, we still have 3 left for this year. In September we have Driven, so come back and watch Driven here on our big screen. I guess we have 4. Then we have Batman coming up in October, so that'll be cool. And then you can see the other ones we got. And we have one for the kids, so in December, so make sure you bring the kids for the Muppet movie. So I'd like to thank Styles Auto Care again for helping sponsor our Tire Side Chat, so thank you very much. Appreciate you guys helping us out. And I'd like to go ahead now and introduce Tom Vadnais. Tom here, and not only as I kind of go through this, I'd like to mention that Tom's a legacy member here with Savoy. He was also a key contributor, and he volunteers his time, and most of the time you'll see him kind of wandering around taking pictures. So he actually takes pictures for us at a lot of these programs. But Tom also is a professional photographer, a licensed professional engineer. So he's been doing that for 40 years. He's an expert witness in vehicle accident reconstruction and vehicle product liability lawsuits. And he's nationally recognized specialist in the tire application and failure analysis. So that's kind of his specialty. So that'll be what he'll be talking about. And he also teaches forensic photography classes. So if you get a chance, you can also go to his website there at vadnaisengineering.com. So I'm going to turn it over to Tom now to go ahead and take us through his presentation. Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you, Bruce. I appreciate that. And welcome, everybody. And I'd like to thank Tom Chenal, who's the one who suggested that I do this. I said, "You sure you want me to talk about what I do for a living?" He's like, yeah, we want to hear that. So thank you, Tom. Thank you for the idea and for allowing me to do this. And for McRae, since I first came here, I had sent a couple pictures that I had taken at the while I was at the museum. And I sent a couple of them, and McRae had contacted me back, and she's really encouraged me to participate a lot more here. So I've been doing that. And big thanks to Blake Johnson, who is the AV manager, and he's the wizard who runs all this stuff, and their full-time photographer. He's become a good friend, and he can do all this incredible stuff. So thank you to everybody else who I've gotten to know over time here. This is such a great place. So these are a couple pictures that I took, at times beforehand. But I also wanted to thank Styles Auto Care for sponsoring this. And let's see if I can remember how to do this. There we go. So my email address, tom@tomvadnais.com. If you got questions, let me know. vadnaisengineering.com. It's supposed to be more regular, but it's kind of sort of occasional blog where I usually have things about forensic photography and then about some of the other interesting cases I've worked on or whatever. So what is forensic? What does that mean? Well, what forensic is something dealing with a court of law where it's dealing with evidence or it's dealing with, this is the official write-up about, or the definition, used or applied in the investigation or establishment of facts or evidence in a court of law. So what is forensic photography? Well, that is the same thing using photographs. So for instance, we have a bad wreck on an interstate, and there are all kinds of skid marks and gouge marks and things like that. Well, we can't cut this giant piece out of the interstate and bring it to court. That's not going to happen. So we've got to take good pictures of it, and then the pictures become the evidence of whatever the accident scene had, whether it's skid marks, gouge marks, other things like that. So automotive forensic photography is forensic photography that just deals with car things. Okay? When I'm taking pictures like that, or any forensic photographer, what we're doing is we're gathering data. We're trying to get all the information that we can get that's available to us. And we're actually also capturing details, because it's really important to be able to have photographs that actually show what they're supposed to show. Because when you're out there and something's just happened and you're out there gathering all the information, you don't know, kind of sort of what happened and maybe what the issues are, but you don't know all of them. And something's going to come up, and you got to have it in your pictures to be able to address that one way or the other. So that is in the details. So that to do that, the photos need to be accurate. They need to be, need to be good quality. They need to be consistent, and they need to be useful. Now, you're not going to use all of them. You could take several hundred pictures in a heartbeat on some of these places and some of these scenes, but you never know which one or which ones are going to be the important ones. So they got to be consistent so that, this ended up being what the issue was, so now it will be useful. They have to be usable to be useful later on. And I've always thought this was funny from my standpoint anyway. There's so much evidence, we should put some aside for a different case. Now, we can't do that, okay? But what you do is, with all this evidence there, you have to document it all so that you have good detail and you have all the data there so that, who knows? Right now, it looks pretty evident to me what it may be on this case, with the knife sticking through them. But maybe the gun has something to do with it, or maybe one of these others. Maybe it was a poison apple. So you have to document everything to be ready to use any of it. I'm going to mention these three terms, and they're really kind of engineering terms, but you've probably heard them at least: yaw, pitch, and roll. And whether for flying or for driving or for boating or whatever. And what that means is, yaw is just going right or left. Pitch is nose down. You hit the brakes in your car and it kind of tilts down. That's pitch down. Then you accelerate and it goes back up. So that's pitch. And then roll is just side to side. And the reason I'm going through those, and you think, I thought this was about photography, is because with a camera you do the same thing. Let me get this thing to cooperate. There we go. So with a camera, and this one doesn't take really good pictures because it's kind of squeezy, so it's not great, but it still will show you what I want to show. So in this case, yaw is side to side. So if I'm trying to take this picture, but I have the camera at the side, well, this part of the lens is going to be further away than this part, so it's not all going to be in focus. I got to make sure that the camera is square that way. And if I tilt it down or tilt it up in pitch, now I'm changing the actual shape of what things are. So that could be important. And if it's roll, it looks like people are sitting on the side, which obviously they're not. So it's really important to pay attention to those things. And where it is important, I'll talk about it individually here. So there are actually there are a whole bunch, but there are three main tools besides your camera and lenses that are really important. And tripod is probably leading the pack. It's one of my favorite tools. Most people who are photographers have one or had one, and usually they hate them, and with good cause, because a lot of them are really, really bad. But if you get a good one, then it's such a help. And I kind of like tripods, so I have a few, and I don't think, and unfortunately, this isn't all of them. But what it will show you is that there are different ones for different purposes. The one I use the most is this one right here, the second from the left. And you can see it's actually taller than me. Then you put a camera on it, and it's even higher. And you think, well, how smart is that? You can't even see through it. Well, if I am at the edge, say, of there's a little incline there, I can have the other two tripod legs right next to me and drop the other one down. And so now I've got a nice, steady camera. And when the camera's steady, I can frame it. I can make sure there is no yaw, pitch, or roll. And I'll explain in a second how to do that. And so, and then let me back up too. This big tall one that I'm holding on to, when I put a camera on top of that, it's at 8 feet. Well, if you look at the driver's eye height of most truck drivers, it's about 8 feet. So now I can get up there and take pictures from a driver's position or video or whatever it is and say, yes, I know it's at 8 feet, and I'm not just holding it up there trying to get it. It's rock solid, and I can focus wherever I want and make sure it's all square. So they all have a use. The first one I'll talk about is making photos at a consistent height. So this was a Prius that was at an intersection with a tractor trailer, and it's a big, big, big intersection. And the speed limit's 65 on the main road with a four-way stop sign, which is just, I think it's kind of crazy, but hey, that's what they did. And so the truck stops at the stop sign. He doesn't see anybody going, so he starts, and in the meantime, the Prius stops, and she comes across and ends up scraping down the front of the truck. And so we're trying to figure out, who should have seen who had right of way, and that kind of thing. But what I'm doing here is just documenting the damage to the side. Now, she just hits the front of the truck just about along the middle of the door. So I don't really need to there's no information up, and now obviously I have overalls and things, but I don't need to get really detailed information on the roof, and the tires are all fine. I don't need those either. So in this case, this is the most important part of it here is, I'm actually going to change this. Oops, hit the wrong thing. It's a new remote to me, so here we go. Okay, this is better. I'm going to use this one. So I don't need that part, but this is where all the damage is, starting right about there. So I need to know what's scratched, what's scraped. Are there black marks from, did she hit the tire at all, the truck tire? Because she sort of spun. So all that stuff's going to come into play, so I need to get this detail. Now, this car happened to be parked. It was in a record yard, a tow yard, and it's on a little bit of an incline, so the back is up higher than the front. So if I'm bending down trying to get this, my camera's not necessarily going to be all nice and square, but I want it to be square so I can go all the way down the side and just get this section. Also, my back and my camera is literally up against another car, so I can't go any further back than that. And I don't want to just take a big wide shot and then just crop it out of there, because now I've lost all kinds of pixels. And I shoot with a 45 megapixel camera, so I get a lot of data. And I want that much data to be able to show detail. So now I just go up, and I move it up a little bit, and then move it up a little bit. And I'm just detailing or documenting the actual patterns of the scratches, the gouges, the scrapes, and things like that, all the way up. Now, I'm going up with each picture. Okay, so when I try to put them all together, and I wish I'd have thought about that when I was out there. I didn't. I usually don't bother to put them as a panorama where you put them all together. But I decided to do that in this case just to show that that's what it was. So now I have, and so if I'm doing it and doing it automatically, I have a lot more overlap between each one than I have here. So here there's almost no overlap, and so I couldn't have it. When you put these together, it's called stitching them together, stitching from image to image. No program would do it, so I had to do it myself. Luckily, I know how to do it. I had to do it before the program started doing it. So you can see that there's a stair step here going down, but that doesn't make any difference because the rest of it is all perfectly aligned. Now, you can see how big it is here, but I can print this and blow it up for court or whatever and have detail all the way through. Besides the second most important tool, or second and third, you could argue, is a polarizer. And you probably heard that term before. You probably have had polarized sunglasses at some point. And if you've ever had polarized sunglasses, and if you turn your head one way or the other, and you can watch, oh, now it's glary, now you can see, maybe you can't see through this window or windshield, oh, now I can see through it, and you look like you're crazy because you're just going back and forth like that, but you can control where the glare is. Well, you can do that with a polarizer on your lens. This was my second favorite museum until, unfortunately, they closed earlier this year. It was the Mullen in Oxnard, California, and Peter Mullen died. He was a multi-billionaire, and he died last September. And they just decided to close the museum, unfortunately. But just like here, you can't use a tripod, so I'm hand holding it. But you can see glare on the side of this vehicle. Fortunately, it's not wrecked, so this is good. But you can see all the glare, and you've lost some detail. Well, now if I put a polarizer on there, polarizing filter, and I rotate it, and I'm just looking, there's no setting or anything like that. You just rotate it until, there, I got rid of the glare. Now I got rid of the glare. Look how rich that looks. And people say, well, it increases the saturation, which is the intensity of the color. It doesn't really increase it. It's not going to go in there and make it more green. But what it does is it gets rid of the glare so you can really see the color. The color comes all the way through. So that's the key. So it goes from that to that, just with the polarizer. And you can see even down the side here, it did everything down. This thing is like a yo-yo here. But all the way down the side, it does a really nice job with that. And you can control how much glare you want to move or remove. But here's a biggie. This was a bad accident. A lot of vehicles on I-85 in South Carolina. And it was horrible. But this is what it looked like to the naked eye. If you just went out there and looked at it right now, if we all went out there, this is gone, but if you could see it, if you could have been there in time, this is what it would look like. So this is properly exposed, and I can't make it any darker, and it's not going to do any good anyway, because there's detail up in here that I'm going to need, and that would all be gone. So, and I could never get it dark enough to get the information. And what it is, it's lost in the glare. So I take a polarizer and I rotate the polarizer. That's actually that's the exact same scene. Nothing different, nothing added. These pictures were taken a minute apart, maybe. And I had moved. I took this picture and I went back. I thought, I gotta go get that without the polarizer to show people the difference. So I went back and took it. So that's what it looks like to the naked eye. You can say, this is proper exposure. Yes, but it's not useful. There's no information in it. There's no data. I need this. Now you can follow, like this one here on the right, far right, you can see how it went off and actually left that furrow, and you can now see the scrapes on the guardrail. This one is sliding sideways. You can tell by the shape of the striations on the side. And so all this information just gone. Even if you're just looking at an accident scene, and one of the questions here, this was off I-20 almost to Augusta, and our truck had been in this lane and made a turn right into the side of a car coming through on a green light. We didn't have much defense on that case, but they still wanted me to go document and say, is there anything there? So, plus you have to investigate it anyway. Even if it's your fault, you have to be able to determine that. So I go out and do it for a client, and the sun is just out of the picture up in the upper left. And so I take the polarizer, put a polarizer on, and now I've got enough detail. But look how much richer it looks. You can just see more information here. And the other thing is it shows that there are no skid marks going through here. There were some paint marks that you can barely see in this picture, but I've got better pictures with the paint marks. But look at, just out of curiosity, look at the windshields right there. See how they're kind of glary and everything? And turn the polarizer, now you can see through them. So the polarizer is really essential. The last one, you got tripod, polarizer, and flash. Most people, I teach a 3-day forensic automotive photography class for Society of Automotive Engineers. And it's mostly colleagues. I know a lot of the people have taken the class. Some of us have been buddies for 30 years. And everybody's afraid of flashes. They don't know what it's going to do. And once they realize, when we get out and practice, they're like, oh, this is really pretty easy. But look at what it does. So I got this car out in Alabama in the middle of nowhere, and the sun is almost directly overhead. And how did I do that just from memory? No. You can look right at this thing and see where you can see a very hard-edged shadow, and it's almost directly under the vehicle, which means the light has to be right over it. And the light is so harsh and so bright that this is the best I can do to try to bring out detail. If I try to brighten it any more, I'm going to have no detail in the hood, no detail in the windshield. And even up here, there's a license tag that you can't read. The trunk got ripped off, and then somebody just placed it up on the top. So I put a polarizer on, and I rotate it to reduce the glare. And then I pop a fill flash in, just enough to bring out some detail in the shadows, in the damaged part. And this, you can't see this with the naked eye. Even with a pair of polarized sunglasses, you can't see this because your eyes don't have a flash. And so, but now I've got lots of detail, and I can explain lots of things about this that I couldn't with the first picture. This was a tire that blew out on the front of a motorhome, and it crashed, went off the road and crashed down in Florida. And your eye goes to the brightest thing in any picture or any scene. Your eye automatically goes there. And it especially goes if it also has something that's either recognizable or something that's really sharp. So something that's bright and something that's recognizable or sharp. So your eye keeps going right to these two trucks, because they're bright, and it's two trucks over there, So if I instead, and so I got a fill flash, which is just filling in just the information here on the damaged part. So I now put a polarizer on, and I turn it, adjust it to get rid of the glare. You can almost, for me anyway, I can almost feel my eyes going from looking at those trucks to now they just almost automatically go to the right, to where the damage is, because that's now the brightest thing with some sharp elements to it. So the polarizer really helps in a lot of ways. Now I can see if there's anything, scratches, tears, or anything on the side of the motorhome. So let's play with some other filters that I don't use as often, but if you need to do it, this is the way to do it. So let's eliminate traffic. Wouldn't that be great? I think we'll just do that. So I could probably patent this if I could figure out how to sell it. No. But it's only, unfortunately, photographically that you can eliminate it, not in real life. So there are two different ways I'm going to show you. The first one's in the camera. So I get something called a neutral density filter. And what that is it's just neutral, so it doesn't change the color at all. And then density just means that it's dark. It's like sunglasses. So the darker it is, it's like putting on darker and darker sunglasses. So when you put dark sunglasses on over your camera lens, the camera is going to be like, gosh, it really got dark. So you have to do something to the exposure. It's going to be a black image, or it's going to be really underexposed. So in this case, what I do is I increase the shutter speed to try to get the vehicles out of the scene. And let me show you how that works. So first, this has a real catchy name too. Format High-Tech Firecrest Ultra 0.6. It just kind of rolls off the tongue, just something that you always remember that. But these are really, really good. This background is white foam core. And so this you see and it's in stops, which is the way we talk in photography. So it's 2 stops darker. This one is 3 stops darker. And I have the glare on there on purpose so that you can see that it's actually not just a solid disc. And then this is 10 stops darker. So if I hold that up right now and looked at it, I couldn't see anything. It'd just be black. I wouldn't see anything. So obviously, if you put that over your lens, you're going to have a really long exposure to actually get the picture. So this is on Georgia 400, and I just did this as a test. This wasn't there wasn't actually an accident scene or something. But even if there are no gouge marks, skid marks, whatever, you might have to know things like where were the broken center lines? How far were they? And you can make measurements or whatever, or you just want to document those. So sometimes you need that kind of information. So just taking the regular picture, regular camera, no filters on it, the exposure was 125th of a second. Oops, hit the wrong thing. And so in 125th of a second, a vehicle going 65 miles an hour, and then we're not going to do a lot of math today, but it goes 3/4 of a foot. So you can see that it's not, you don't see a sharp shape, but you can pretty much tell what kind of car it is and all that, but you can see it's just blurred just a little bit. So I put 3-stop neutral density on there. So I have to increase my shutter speed, so I'm at 1/13 of a second. So instead of 125th of a second, 1/13 of a second, a little more light comes in. So that blurs a little bit more. So you can see it's 7.3 feet that the vehicle's moved in that time. So that's about half the length of the car, let's say. So, I'm getting about half a car with smears on both sides. Well, that doesn't really help too much. I put the one that looks black, 10 stops, and now it's a 2.5 second exposure. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi and a half. Well, in that time, the car is out of the scene because it's 238 feet that the car would travel at 65. It never registers. It takes the full 2.5 seconds to have everything else show up. Well, the car's never in one place, any of them, at any long enough to show up. So they never show up. Now, if it's rush hour and everybody's just sitting there, of course you're going to take pictures of them. But as long as the cars are moving, that they never show up. Now, you can do it later on in post-processing if you happen to go and you didn't bring your neutral density filters, using something called stack median in Photoshop, and I'll show you what that is. So now instead I take however many, I took 5 in this particular case. And I try to get them so that I wait and wait so that there's as few cars as possible, and I hope that they're in slightly different places. So I take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Now I bring them all into Photoshop and I align them, and then I'm not going to go through the whole process, but then you stack them and do stack medians. What stack median does is it looks at all 5 images, every pixel. And so like down here, for instance, it looks at one of these grass pixels and says, yep, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I see that pixel in every one of these. So it sends it on through. 1, 2, 3, 4, yep, I see that one in every one. But where it says, oh, wait a minute, I've only see that pixel in one of them or 2 of them, it throws that out. So that doesn't register. You won't see that in the final picture. And so what happens is you get this. And that's those same 5 pictures all stacked together. But you see, I got just enough overlap on a couple of them that it left that little mark right there. So I just cloned that out in Photoshop. And while I was at it, I also cloned out all the debris that was on the side because that wasn't there. And then I send the county a bill. No, I don't really do that. But I save every single step of this so that I can show exactly what I did, and people on the other side can take what I did and replicate the exact same thing. It shows I didn't monkey with anything. Here it is. And I shoot not in the raw, because that would not be good. I shoot raw images, which are like unprocessed images that you have to put into some kind of a processor. And so those cannot be altered. You cannot save over a raw. So I'm guaranteed that what I am showing people is exactly what I shot, because I can't change. The only thing you can change is the name. That's it. So I'm able to prove that this is what I did and give it to anybody and walk them through, or if they already know how to do it, they can do the same thing. Now, I take panoramas in the field sometimes. This was during the night, there was a big storm. This is in the middle of nowhere in South Carolina. And big storm comes through, and this old tree comes right across the road at an angle. And it's a rural road. That's hard to say. And speed limit's 55. And in the morning, these 2 guys are going to go out fishing. So it's real early. The sun hadn't come up yet, and this is, like I said, middle of nowhere. It's pitch black. And all of a sudden, they're like, what is that? And they swerve. And luckily for them, they swerved in the right direction because the tree was like this, and they kept going along the tree. But they finally hit it because to the right is just a big ditch that was all full of water, and then a big embankment. And so the question was, and you can see there are a couple headstones here, over there, and a couple under here, and all that. Well, there's a little church here, a little rural church. So they sued the church for having this tree. I was working for South Carolina DOT. They sued DOT saying you should have known that this was bad tree and take it out before anything happened. And so, of course, sue everybody. That's the idea. And fortunately, the guys weren't hurt badly. And so I go out there, and we have an arborist, and we've got all kinds of other experts. Well, I'm the accident reconstruction expert and the photography expert. And so my client says, I want really good detailed pictures of this tree so that the arborist and all these other people can talk about, see right here, there's this crack that goes up to here and here. So I had to take really good pictures that we'd have to probably blow up big for court. So it's a narrow 2-lane road. I'm right at the edge of the road, and right off the edge just goes down in a deep ditch that is full of water. And it's a pretty wide ditch. And on the other side, even if I was foolish enough to try to jump that, on the other side, it goes straight up, and it was all full of sticker bushes and everything, so I wouldn't even try. So the best I can do is get right to the edge of the road, and then I go start the middle of the tree, and real careful. I have my camera balanced so that the pitch doesn't change, and there's no roll in it. And also, but I am going to yaw it, because I am going to turn it this way, this way, this way, just a little bit, and I'm going to do a lot of overlap so that they all match later on. Because I could just take a picture with a wide angle lens, and I've got a 45 megapixel camera, but I crop it out and I end up with just a few pixels. So I want them, because they said want this big. So what I do is I take this first picture, take the second one, third one. You see I don't move it much. It's like a lot of overlap, so we're going to be able to make sure everything fits together and all the way to the end like that. And then I bring it into Photoshop and I align it and then tell it we're going to do this pano. And like on the Prius where I had to hand stitch it, Photoshop could actually deal with this one because I did enough overlap. But now I've got this on, you see how big it is here. And I could print this huge, and there's going to be detail enough throughout the whole thing to discuss it. So that is using multiple images to make one big panorama image. Now sometimes I've got to do it in a vehicle, and depending on the traffic conditions or whatever it is, if the road's closed or whatever, I could set up, sometimes I can set up the tripod enough that I can still be in the vehicle and do that. But I also wanted to, when I teach this, I wanted to show that you can do it handheld if you're really, really careful about what you're doing. So what I wanted to show was, what could this person sitting at a stop sign, and the other traffic didn't have it, the other direction didn't have a stop sign, what could they see? So this is looking out the passenger window, and then I'm just going to do a series with some overlap on it. So I'm just looking around from one side to the other side, and then finally looking out the side window on the right. So I bring it all in, and so I don't have it exactly level as I'm trying to be real careful doing that. So I've got a little bit, kind of like even with the Prius one where there was a little jagged thing, so it's jagged here, but I don't worry about that. I just fill that up with gray. This is what's important, is all the way across. So the question would be, and this wasn't for a case, I did that just for, this is a demo, and if the person who's driving this vehicle said, oh, I looked to the right the whole time and then it was clear, so I went. Well, the question would be, could they have seen somebody to the left? Well, if you're looking to the right, no, you can. You got to look back to the looking to the left, rather, you can, not till you look back to the right. But is it possible, had they looked right before pulling out, that they could have seen a vehicle coming? Yeah, you can see pretty far down there. So you can answer those kind of questions by having, you can't do that all in one shot. It's not, you don't have a camera that's that wide. So you've got to take these, but you got to be real careful the way that you do them. And so you can do it handheld if you're careful. You don't have to always do it on a tripod. So I mentioned, how much you got to pay attention to getting all the dimensions right. But there's a difference between aligned, because you think aligned and level, that's the same thing, or having your camera level. So there's a big thing. Let me show you the differences here. So this is aligned. This was in, I had a deposition in Oakland, California, and I got out of there without getting shot, and then went to San Francisco and got out of there without getting shot. So I was doing pretty good. But I went right here. I knew exactly where I wanted to go. And you can see way down here on the bottom, the curb is even all the way across there. So it's aligned. It's perfectly aligned with the curb. But it's obviously wrong. That's not the way that it looks there. And this guy couldn't take another step without just splatting down on the ground and try to serve a meal in one of these houses and find out where all your dishes go. So this obviously is incorrect. So now this is level. So now if your camera is level, it's on a tripod, and I make sure that it's level. And so when the camera is level, then now I can actually measure what the slope is of the road. because now I know it's level on the bottom, and just get a protractor, I can measure the angle of the slope, because that could be important about what does it take to roll down this hill or to get up the hill or whatever it is. So how do we keep the camera level? Well, this is in the D850. I shot Nikon for 40 years, since I was 4 years old. And in the camera, there's a built-in level. And so what this level is showing here is that this is tilted a lot. You know, it's exaggerated tilt, but that's tilted a lot. And that also, it goes up and down. If you have the pitch go up and down, that trapezoid part goes up or down, and by the amount that it's tilted. If it's tilted just a little bit, it's almost flat, but it still has that shape. If it's tilted even more, it's got more of that shape. So you just keep adjusting. Again, I do this all on a tripod so it stays there. And then I can have the camera level. But now when the pitch gets real close to being level, it's hard to tell on here. So they were pretty clever. And what they did was they have this dot in the middle so that if the pitch is real close, it looks like it's already lined up. But then and so everything turns green, but then the dot turns green when the pitch is level. So I know I've got it in roll and in pitch is level. Now it doesn't tell you anything about yaw, about right to left, but we'll talk about that in a minute. So that's how I know when I go to a scene that the scene is level. So this is a scene photo after, and this accident, the tractor trailer's going into the camera, into the photo, cars coming out. This person had worked 3 jobs in a row without sleeping and had been working for like 30 hours, fell asleep, middle of the night, crosses the center line, and the truck tries to miss him, but doesn't, and then the truck ends up in the field behind the bushes there. And so the question could be, well, the slope of the road, you know, it's tilted down somewhat this way, and that made the truck go in that direction or not. But actually, if you get your camera level, this is what it looks like. There is no slope to the road. But if you're just out there and you're just taking pictures and you're just sort of being casually and take that picture, take that, and this isn't off by a lot, but it's off by enough. And I've seen enough cases where things like that get thrown out. The pictures get thrown out because they're deceptive, because there is no draw to the right because it's level. So you be careful with that kind of getting your camera set up. Now, when I'm taking pictures, like I said, I do a lot of tire work in my studio lab. I have all my photo equipment and everything else, my background paper. Now I need to look for this piece that came off, this tread and belt piece here. I need to look straight down at it. So when I do that now, there is no roll to it because I'm looking straight down. So it's only pitch, which would either distort the tread in one direction or the other direction. And if I have the yaw off, one side's going to be in focus and the other side's not. So I have to make sure those are both correct. So I take one of those bullseye levels. You can go get them at Home Depot. I think I got 6 of them for like $1 on Amazon. And you get that level. Now I know it's level in the 2 directions that matter. Roll doesn't make any difference in this case. Only pitch and yaw do. So now I've got them square in there. And the difference is now when I take these, if I don't have the camera exactly level, then I'm going to have, let's say this is in focus and that's out of focus, or this is in focus and that's out of focus because the camera's off just a little bit. So it's essential to make sure that you get the camera set exactly right. And then I can take this whole series, and if I need to, I can do overlaps and then print out a whole big tread for however long this is. Now, again, since there's no level here, now it's aligned because I have, if you think if this was the piece of the tread, and now I got it so that, I don't want it to be at an angle to the tread. I want it to be square to the tread, but it's looking straight down. So there's no setting, but I just make sure that I have the same amount at the top and the bottom pretty much. So I align it that way. So that's not level, it's aligned. So there are slight differences, but basically just means pay attention to getting your camera right. And so it's important when you're trying to actually make measurements from photographs. You've got to have your camera If I want to take a picture of the front of this, it's flat. I better have my camera exactly flat and square, not tilted up or down one way or the other or roll. I need it to be exactly square. This was on 316, not too far from Athens, and it was like 5 in the morning, and right where this was, the speed limit was 65, and somebody, like I said, 5 in the morning just drove slapping the back of it, and it was all lit up like Christmas Day with all these lights and everything. But of course, part of the lawsuit was that the lights weren't quite where they were supposed to be, if they were supposed to be to spec. So we had to, well, are they? We had to make that determination. So if I'm standing down here on the ground, and it was both the upper and the lower lights. So I put this rod here, the surveyor's rod, and we're only going to deal with the upper one right now just for time. And if I look here and say, where's the center of this yellow light? You come across, it's about 8.25 feet. That's what it looks like off the ground. Is that proper? Well, we have to go back and check the specs and that kind of thing. But you see there's a part of a truck right here behind it. And so, and there was another truck behind it, another truck at this body shop, so they couldn't move all those. But luckily that truck was unlocked. So I climbed up, opened the door, climbed up on it, and leaned over and got up so my height was the same as the light itself. And I made sure that the camera was exactly parallel to or perpendicular to it. And actually, when you look at it, it's actually like 8.75, not 8.25. That's a half a foot difference, which is a huge amount in light placement. So that makes all the difference in the world. If I'd just gone with that first picture from the ground, I would have said, no, it's supposed to be 8 3/4, only 8 1/4. No, it isn't. It was 8 3/4, but you got to get up there and you got to get perpendicular to it. When I did the bottom light, I just lay down on my stomach. I have a little shorty tripod, and I had that going straight in there. So again, I could say exactly what the height of that light was, because these kind of details are really important. This on this van, these mirrors will slide in or out depending on if you're pulling a trailer or something. You pop them out. If you're not, you slide them back in. So the guy said, "Oh no, my mirror was in," but it comes up against the tractor trailer, and they don't hit body to body. But on the fender of the tractor trailer, there's this black smear all the way down there that was from this corner of this mirror. Well, the problem is for where that, as far, if this is the fender, how far that mark was, he'd have been scraping against the side of the truck. The truck would have been scraping against the side of the van. So I get a rod, a measuring rod there, and I use a thing called a plamp, P-L-A-M-P. It's for plant clamp, originally made for using it out in the field, taking pictures of flowers to hold the flower in place so it doesn't blow in the breeze. But then they figured out, hey, there's a lot more uses for this, and it's rock solid. Well, I take this measuring rod and I have a little line level. I make sure the rod is exactly level, first of all. Then I get my camera all level like that in pitch and yaw, actually all in roll, pitch, and yaw. But this looks like it's 1.4 feet. But I come around to the front and really go right down the side of the trunk. It's actually 1.1 something feet. Big difference. And also, that's with it in, showing that there's no way that could have made that mark. It's too far in. It would never have reached that far over. Then I have another set of pictures where I pulled it out and showed, okay, now it fits. So it's really, really, really important to do this and to pay attention to your camera position for each one of these shots and to be able to describe it, because, and just like I'm telling all of you all hear that, I go in, I got to explain it to my client. They don't know anything about that. So I explain it to them, and then I explain it to the other side in the deposition, and then I go tell the judge and the jury. I have to explain this, and this is how it works and why. And then a lot of times, and the other thing I do is I help my client. We get a lot of other pictures thrown out because they are deceptive. They weren't shot properly. So it's really important to document these things. So I did these. I do a lot of tire work, a lot of tire failure analysis, and then tire applications and things. And this is really a tire application case. somebody bought in South Carolina an old Explorer, and it came with 20-inch wheels and tires, so the big wheels and the little short tire on top of it. And the very first day they have it, and there's seating for 5 in here, 5 seatbelts. They have 7 people in it. A lot of them are kids. But he's driving down the road, just got it, so it's all new to him. A deer or something comes running out, and he swerves hard to the right, and then swerves even harder back to the left, overcorrects. And when he does that, he rolls over, and all the unbelted people get thrown out. Some get killed. I mean, it was a horrible case. So the question was it because it had 20-inch wheels and tires on it instead of the original wheels and tires versus just his overcorrection? So we found an exemplar, same year, and that was not easy to find, one that would run. And this one ran, you can see all the smoke there? It's from the transmission. And we got one test done, and we were getting ready to start the other test, and kablam, the whole transmission. So we paid $1,500 for this vehicle and put $1,800 in the transmission because we had to finish the testing. And then we couldn't use this facility. This is in Charlotte, so we had to go to Ohio. But anyway, so testing is really fun like that. And it is fun. Testing is a blast. And so of course, we were videoing this, but I took still pictures. And so why don't you just take shots from video? You've already got video. The problem is with the video frame rate, be say like shutter speed, the same equivalent as shutter speed in stills, is between 1/30th of a second and 1/60th of a second. So these tires and wheels would all be blurs. So if I took screenshots of them, they're just blurs. I can't tell anything from a blur. So I needed to have a very high, for people who know photography, that's a really high shutter speed. 1/640th of a second is a blink of an eye or partial blink of an eye. So I did that so I could freeze, because we're going about 55 or 60 in this. So I've got a big long lens, and I've got a tripod, and I've got the head loose enough, but holding it in position so I keep it level, and I track it. And it's kind of like, a baseball swing or a golf swing. You start before it goes, you stay on it, and I had the autofocus point set on the door handle here because it's something it could find. And as the Explorer's changing shape as it's going around the curve, if I focused on the front or the back, part of it would go out of focus. But if I focus on the middle and I get enough depth of field, as it goes backward and forward, it all will be in focus. So I'm now chasing this or following this, and now you can see he's just finished his turn to the right, and now he's straightening up and starting to go back to the left. So what I want to look at is, when do these wheels pick up off the ground? And then what happens to the inside tires? Do they start to roll over? And is there going to be a difference in the rollover of the tires on this versus the other one? So then I just start taking pictures, and you can see right here, it's about the rear ones, I think, off just a little bit. Now they're both off, and he keeps going more and more. And this vehicle is completely instrumented, so we know every single thing. We know the slightest twitch of the steering wheel. We know the speed down to, and the steering angle and all this stuff down to minute numbers. And what we did is the accident reconstructionist on that case, I just did the tire part and the photography part, that they had calculated, he went this far at this speed, then turned the wheel this hard to do this. So we replicated that in the test. And so there's a buddy of mine driving in this instrumented thing. And now I can start seeing what's happening with these inside tires. The tread's actually starting to lift up off the ground, and it's lifting off more and more. And now he's just riding right on the edge of the tread, almost to the sidewall. He's rolled it over that much. And when it got to here, I thought, uh-oh, it's going over, even with these outriggers on it. I was scared for my buddy. I mean, he's in a full racing harness and everything, and helmet and all that stuff, but I was pretty scared for him. But it didn't go over, thank God. But you can see here how that tire is almost riding on the sidewall. It's not even on the tread anymore. So those are the kind of details that I had to get that I couldn't get from a video, or even I couldn't see it. My eye doesn't go as fast as the shutter speed would go. So now I come back, and I didn't have any idea what this really looked like while I was doing it. I'm concentrating on shooting. It's blam, 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 as he's going by. And then finally, he starts to come, like I said, this is about as far as it went. Then all of a sudden it starts to really whip around just like what it did at the time of the accident, except that it rolled. And then starts coming back down, and oops, I went too far. And then just sort of slams back down. And then we compared that to the original equipment tires, which rolled over the same way, by the way, and made basically no difference in the forces or anything like that. And so, but it was really an interesting thing, and this was the only way to do it. So I had to have the right shutter speed. I had to have the right aperture to get the depth of field that I wanted. And I had to be able to track and know how to track to be able to keep everything sharp. And then I used these for analysis, not just to explain what happened, but I used them for the analysis too. So it's really important to get these things right. My buddy, he's become a really good friend, and he was an original mentor to me, is England's best known, and maybe Europe's best known landscape photographer. And he's been around for a long time. He's in his mid to late 70s. And but he didn't like adjust it or manipulate it or processed. He said, how about cleansing? Let's cleanse our images. And I thought, that's how British is that, you know? I thought it was just a perfect thing. So now I call it cleansing too in his honor. So here's adjusting some images. I got called to this accident, to go look at this accident scene a couple months after the accident. Well, a lot of times when there's a wreck and vehicles spin out and one ends up over here, one ends up over here, the police will paint, like they look like little T's next to where all the wheels were, where all the tires were, center of the tire. And then if there's marks here, the skid mark started here, they'll put like a U, and then another, it goes up to here, put another one, maybe some dots. So there's a lot of paint marks, and they last longer than any skid marks or anything. But these paint marks were almost completely faded. In fact, you can see there's one right there, there's one right here, but there's even some out here. So I could see them, you know, as I'm walking out there, I could still see them, and I'm drawing them and documenting and measuring them, but it's hard to show anybody what this really looked like. So I can bring this into Photoshop and then just enhance. So what I do, for people who know anything about Photoshop, I go in and I select the color of one of these. I think I use this one here. And then I just said increase the hue, increase the saturation, rather, of this. So bring it out some. And then I paint just the part that actually has, and you can see how much is here. Come on, get up there. Right there, that you couldn't even see in this picture. But now you can see it. So I didn't do anything, and again, I saved the layers to do this so I can show exactly what I did, and then finally got the pictures from the time of the wreck and compared it and show, yeah, it's exactly the same thing that shows in those pictures. Then I get pictures from people. Most of the time, sometimes they're cell phone pictures from passersby or I'll call them participants in the accident, but a lot of times I get police pictures. And this was one bad accident in LA County. This tractor trailer down here blows a front tire and goes across the center line. There was no barrier or anything. Just took out a whole bunch of cars, and he had a big old piece of equipment that fell off and took out another car. So it's just horrible. So the police send up a helicopter. The guy's taking pictures, but he's got his flash on. So the flash is flashing back and obscuring everything he's trying to take a picture of. And this happens a lot. I get a lot of these. So what I did was I brought this into Adobe Camera Raw, or you could bring it in Lightroom if you use that. I don't, but you can use Lightroom. So this thing called dehaze. So I was able to take some of that out. Now I can't take out all, there's some stripe kind of looking things that were there. So now I can see a little bit better, but now I bring it into Photoshop and I actually get the colors right and I adjust it enough. Now there's a lot of detail in this. I can actually see this and use this. And then I sent that back to my client and he sent it to the police, and the police used this picture, instead of their picture, because their picture doesn't show anything or doesn't show much. So you can still bring information out by doing processing. I had this awful case in Vermont, and this woman's driving in this direction, obviously. She comes around this curve, and it's just over the border from New York, so she's got New York tags on it. She lived just over the Vermont border, but she took this route all the time. Tractor trailer coming in the same direction where that motorhome is, he's coming up here, And he said, I'm just driving in my lane, and this woman comes over and hits me. Well, looking at this, it was really hard to tell. So I then got the scan. I scanned this and then was able to clean it up and show these marks come right across the center line, and they split, showing that the tractor and the trailer, the guy steered so hard in the tractor that the trailer doesn't track it anymore, doesn't catch up to it, and so he's way over the center line. And again, the Vermont State Patrol, they actually asked me, do you mind doing a few more of them for us? So I did a whole batch of them for them. So let me, probably getting close to having to end here. Oh, no, I guess we're good. This BMW is driving on 85, just past 985. He says, I'm in the right lane, and his truck just runs up and runs into me and scrapes down the side of my vehicle. The woman driving this truck says, no, I'm driving. And she said, I'm in the second lane from the right because there are all these entrances and exit ramps, and I don't want to mess with the traffic there. So I just get over a lane, let people come on and off, and then I'm past those, and my exit's 2 miles up, so I start inching my way back over. Put on my signal, I start inching my way back over. As I just cross into that lane, next thing I know, this guy flies by me, and I hit him. Who's right, and how can you tell? So I look at this vehicle, this BMW, and for some reason it took like our people were not very forthcoming. So it took like 3 or 4 months to actually see our truck. So I'm out here looking at this BMW, documenting these, and I have these scales, and I'm doing the same thing. I'm down, I got the camera down, so I'm perpendicular exactly to the marks on the side, and I make sure there's no pitch, there's no roll, and there's no yaw issue, that I'm exactly perpendicular and square to it. Then about, like I said, 3.5, 4 months, whatever it was later, we finally got to see their truck. I did the same thing. And so this would have been the wheel that would have, so these lug nuts do stick out some, and so I put the same scales there. I do the same exact thing, getting the camera there, yaw pitch and roll, get it all square. Well, then I came back and I kept trying to do it in Photoshop. Trying, how can I do this? And I couldn't figure it out. And so I got I made a big print of the BMW, and then I made a smaller print on transparent inkjet film of just the lug nuts from the truck, and I printed it at what's called a lower opacity, so you can kind of sort of see through it. So I'd be able to see through it and see the marks on the car. So then I just took that and I kept moving it a little bit, because what's happening is, of course, the tire on the truck is rotating, and they're also traveling in relation to each other. So I have motion from rotation, and some of it's from motion, from lateral motion. How much of each is there? I don't know. That's what I'm trying to find out. So I finally figured it out by doing this. And by the way, I had taken this that I had printed, and I laid it right on top of here. And this is, you can see 2 there and 2 there. I laid it right on top, and it was exact all the way down. No correction, all the way top to bottom. So I know I had it exactly square. So I finally figured it out. So I went back, and I decided, with the wheel, I decided I'm going to do like a clock thing, and it was only 10 lug nuts, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, or 9, 10. So then I figured out which lug nut touched where by doing that. Then I could go back in Photoshop and do the same thing. I take that, and so I've numbered the lug nuts. So right now, only 6 through 10 are making these marks, 6 through 10. The other ones haven't started to come into play yet. So the first one that came in here, is the first mark was from number 6. None of the others have started marking yet. So now I move it a little bit and rotate it just ever so slightly and got it, so that now you can see it's centered on 6 and on 7. None of the other ones yet. And I keep doing that, and now not up to 8 yet, but I got 6, 7, 9, 10. Not from the other ones yet. So I just keep doing that, keep moving it. And so you can see how it's rotating some, and it's sliding against the car, if you will, some. And now I'm picking up 1, 2, and 3, and I just keep doing that all the way through when we're getting here. I'm down to still 1, 2, 3, 4 are marking. And by the way, just this scratch here, and then there's actually a tear right up in here, which is now being hidden by that. Those are from a different incident that this guy had. So yeah, I'm not riding with him anytime soon, I can guarantee you that. So now I'm at lugs 2 and 3, and now I'm just at lug 3, and then the next one it comes off. So now I know where the first one started marking, and I know where the last one started marking, and I also know how much that's rotated. So what I do is I take the first one back in its place, and I drag the last one all the way back over here, and I match them here where the scales meet, and I can tell that it rotates 109 degrees. So, it's 360 degrees is one whole rotation. So about a third of a rotation. Not much. Remember, these are going at highway speeds. This is on the highway. And then I take the beginning position, there we go, and go to the end position. And I can measure that. And again, you see the green lines here coming down. So that goes through the center of the hub. So I've got so now I know how much it rotated over what distance. And from that, I can calculate the amount of time of contact between the two based on assuming the speed of one of them. So the truck was this old ratty truck, and she said, it'll go 65 when I'm standing on the gas with both feet, and if it's a really nice day and the wind's behind me. So I knew that was about the limit. So I did it at 55, 60, and 65, because she said I'm keeping up with traffic. So by doing that, then I calculated the time to make just that mark as quickly as that must have gone, which is about 0.03 of a second. That's how little they contacted. That if the truck's going 55, the car's going 68.8, and so on for this chart. And what that tells you is the car's going faster than the truck. Has to, because otherwise there's no way that the marks could be in that direction and they wouldn't match together. It can't be in the other direction. So the car has to be going faster, and significantly faster, and it matched her story, not his. They get this. I did a PowerPoint for it, and it settled like the next day. And I said, it's like no more work to do on that case, okay? But that's okay. So I'm going to end up with just a couple things that are kind of fun. This is what's sort of a bad manipulation. I've got a 4Runner, which I absolutely love, a TRD Pro, my second one. And so I've been sort of looking at the history of 4Runners. I'm a real car person. So this is the very first one. It's 40 years ago. Actually, last year was their 40th anniversary for 4Runners. And so I'm looking at this picture, and what's wrong with this picture? Well, nice looking truck and everything in the background. If it's moving that fast, how come it's not moving against the background? If it's not moving, it's because it has a real fast shutter speed. If it has a real fast shutter speed, the tires aren't rotating. They're stationary. So something isn't right. So you start looking at it and you go, oh, wait a minute. The inside tires aren't moving. So if they're not moving and it's on a dirt road and these are spinning, there should be dirt flying all over the place. So obviously somebody in the advertising department just put some kind of a rotary filter on these back here, on the right side. And one of the times, Society of Automotive Engineers used to have an agreement with Toyota. They have really beautiful facilities all over the country. So it happened to be that I taught one at Southeast Toyota where they bring in 4Runners and things. And they had to have this in a big mural on their wall down the hall. So I said, hey, y'all, come here. Let me show you something. And I pointed that out, and they're like, why did you show me that? Now I'm going to see that forever. I can't look at this picture anymore. But it just shows you that, So I have to pay attention to that with the pictures that I'm getting, especially if people say it's showing this, that, or the other thing. You got to make sure that's really what it's showing. So then there's some fun manipulations. I was in Siena in Tuscany, and there was this beautiful old well. It used to be the well for that area. And so there's a building, and then part. And I'm looking through like a little portico thing, and it's all open at the top, completely open at the top. And so, it's nice light coming through there. So what I did was I straightened it a little bit because I had to use a real wide lens because it was sort of a small hole I was looking at. And I thought, sometimes I'm sure sun comes down like this through that big old hole. So I just put a nice sunbeam on there. So you can do manipulations like that. Now, I would never say that's a forensic thing, but it's for art, that's perfectly fine to do. But don't pass it off as forensic. And so I'm at Bryce Canyon. And if you've ever been to Bryce Canyon, these are about 200 feet tall. And so I was there with some buddies, and we were out photographing. And we go in, they have the most amazing gift shop. I'm like, why is all this up? It's in the middle of nowhere, and you can get anything. Just think of something off the top of your head. They have it in this gift shop. So we're in this gift shop walking around, and they're like, how could they have all this stuff here in the middle of nowhere? So I see this little Caterpillar tractor model. It's about this big. So I got to get that. And my buddy said, what are you buying a Caterpillar tractor model for out here in the gift shop? So I said, you'll see. So we go out there, and one of my buddies is 6'4", and so I said, Wes, grab this from the back side so I don't have to clone your hand out of this thing, and just hold it out so it's in the same light. So he does that, and they're still like, what are you doing? So I take this picture, and I come back, and I put this on here, and these, like I said, these are 200 feet tall, and this thing I can put in the Caterpillar tractor I can put in my pocket. So I did that and put these tracks, and without putting all the Photoshop stuff on there, I just had just the picture. And at that time, I was doing a lot of presentations to camera clubs and things, and nature photography clubs. And so I presented this, and I said, can you believe what they're doing in the national parks? That they just allow people to come in here and plow up this thing. People were furious. I mean, I thought, I better cut this out because I'm going to get hurt, if I'm not careful. And so I said, no. And then so I pulled this up and said, I did this. And I had the little tractor with me. I said, see, no, I just. So, you got to be careful with some of the stuff you see, that it's easy to do. And it looked convincing enough that I showed it to groups of photographers who all thought that was real, So you have to be very careful with some of these things. And then my little beloved friend who's passed away, she's my best friend, Fredo. Even when she was full grown, I could sit down and she fit on my lap just fine. Well, this is in Zion National Park, and this rock is about probably 7.5, 8 feet, 9 feet high. It's just giant rock. So she's not nearly that big, or wasn't nearly that big. But still, I thought, she couldn't go, so I bring her there virtually. So I put her up on top of this rock. So again, these are just sort of fun manipulations. And this I found, I can't take credit for. I found this many years ago, and I thought this when I first got into doing. Trying to play around with stuff like this in Photoshop, and I thought that was the best job I think I'd ever seen. And obviously, it's somewhere like England or something like that. So I was trying to teach Fredo, before she passed away, I was trying to teach her how to Photoshop and how to edit her own pictures. And, it's pretty stressful, so she would just fall asleep. So anyway, that's what I have. I hope that it gives you a little bit of insight about not just the forensic process, but how photography is so important, and doing photography right is so important, and it's actually usable. We actually use the photography. It's not just I'm taking pictures of evidence going around. So you've got to pay attention and do it the right way. And that's it. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to open it up to questions. We have 2 microphones, so if you would wait for us to get the microphone to you, because we are recording and we'd like to make sure we get it on there. So I'll start out right here in the front row.
Enjoyed the presentation.
Well, thank you.
Very much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. My question to you, and not really, it's a combination question comment. If you came into court and had these pictures, I would think you did the work in 10 minutes. Clearly, based on what you told us you did, it was hours, days, weeks.
Oh, yeah. It's a process.
So my question to you is, as an expert witness who does this stuff, how do you charge? Do you charge by the hour? Do you charge by the job? And do the clients put maximums on for you that you can only charge for X amount of hours?
No, and that's a great question. Unfortunately, the cases I work on are usually really big, so they're just like, just do it right. And they know I'm going to do that right, and I never, ever, ever abuse it. But I also charge for it. If it takes me 6 hours to get something together, they get charged for 6 hours of doing it. And like the one where it took me so long to figure out the scrapes on that BMW, that took me quite a while to do it. And I billed them for it, and the other side never figured it out. they came up with just some random stuff that was wrong. And they never sat down and figured it out. They settled the case with one PowerPoint. It was worth whatever it was. And again, I don't ever abuse that because I want the clients to come back. Plus, that's not me anyway. That's not my nature. But I do bill for it. And that's what I try to explain to people when I'm teaching this. I said, do it right. You can charge for it. They want you to do it right. They need it to be right. So, but that's a great question. And people are happy to do it. I've never had one person complain. You spent 4 hours on those photographs getting them together? I said, yeah, and they were pretty good too, weren't they? Or whatever, and just making fun of it. But no one's ever said that.
Okay, adding on to that question, a couple of your examples, like the Prius, the mirror on the truck, and even the BMW with the wheel, they seem like relatively minor accidents. Are people really suing over this stuff and pulling in experts for trivial stuff?
Oh, yeah.
And maybe it wasn't trivial, but it seemed trivial to me.
No, and it's amazing how when they get close to attorneys, how bad the injuries become. But did I say that out loud? But in fact, and this is bad, but some of my buddies, we're constantly sending pictures back. I said, can you believe somebody survived this? And it's like a scrape down the side of the vehicle. But so we deal with that all the time, and that's part of the problem. Is that if you don't spend the money and the effort to get rid of that, you're going to be paying all these pretty good-sized claims. And yeah, I have several hours in these, but it's not like 100 hours, so it's not like a crazy bill. And it's enough that it makes it worthwhile. And it also sends a message that if the insurance company keeps actually doing something about these cases, they tend to go away, at least after a time, because people are like, well, don't sue. And the attorneys say, I'm not suing them because they're going to figure it out, and we aren't, And so it makes a difference. But a lot of the cases I do, especially the tire cases, they're usually traumatic, usually just horrible. I mean, awful, awful cases. And thank goodness, my job is just looking at greasy and broken stuff. I mean, I don't have to go out. I've only ever been once on a live accident scene that had just happened. I was doing some work for UPS in Birmingham, and they come on now. What do I do? So we run out there, and an accident just happened 2 miles down the road, and it was a fatality. And so I got there before the police and before the ambulance. The only time ever I've been there where I've seen something bad like that, because I don't want to see that either.
Don, we've got a question here.
I was wondering, it looked like one of your pictures had an ISO camera, like it was film. But are you basically using digital?
Yes, it's all digital. And when you set your exposure, there are 3 different settings that you use. One of them is your aperture, the size of the opening in your lens. The second is shutter speed, how long the shutter's open. And the third is your ISO, or your sensitivity. Same thing that we used to have film speed. You could buy a roll of 100 speed film or 400 speed film. Now we just set it, and we can change it. If I'm taking a picture in here right now, that's pretty bright, so I'd probably have a pretty low ISO. If I turn like this, I've got a couple lights up here, but it's really pretty dark. Otherwise, I'd have a really high ISO, and I don't have to keep changing out rolls. But yes, that's one of the 3 parts of exposure. Does that answer your question? Is that what you were asking?
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
Since it's becoming a hot button and everything, artificial intelligence, how is that starting to affect things like photography, where people are manipulating photos beyond what the actual photo should show, rather than just using good optics to create what it really was? Has that started to show up yet or not?
Oh, yeah. And there's good and bad AI. When I mentioned taking the pictures, when I had multiple images, and Photoshop's trying to put them together, it actually uses AI in some of those to help. Now, what the AI that it uses there is, okay, I know that this looks kind of blurry, this pixel compared to this pixel, so that's probably not in focus. Oh, these 2 here are pretty sharp, so this is. So it helps, and then the AI knows, oh, I think I know what this is a picture of, so it can sort of help do that. But then there are plenty of them and there are books on it, and there's all kinds of software that you can use. I don't typically ever have to deal with that stuff in the work I do, but some crime scene photographers have to deal with that. And they do things like look at, well, we don't really have a picture of it here, but like say on here, if there was something that was off and that you think, wait a minute, the shadow over here goes in this direction, but that one goes like that. There's only one sun. How can you have two different directions of shadows? And so you can do that kind of analysis and measure shadow directions and then try to figure out, okay, with this shadow, you can then say, okay, the point of light where it came from is up here. From here, this one comes up here. They don't match. Something had to happen in between. Yeah, and yes, yeah, and he's asking, could AI start off with the shadows and then try to move that? Yes, it can, but most people aren't that sophisticated, and it also, but they're getting more sophisticated, and as yes, yep, and so where that's headed is extraordinarily expensive and extraordinarily sophisticated computer software that analyzes pixel by pixel, and they can tell things like the tonality between these two is off just enough that isn't real. Something happened in between these two. And so it's a very specialized, I don't ever get in, I don't have to deal with that for what I do deal with. And there are books written, I've read one of them and reading a second one specifically about developing that stuff, and it's fascinating, but it's a real specialized field. And to do that, and of course, it's like a technology battle like everything else. Like let's say the bad AI people are staying like a half a step ahead of the good AI people. So they're like, oh, wait a minute, how did that happen? Oh, here's how we get around that. So, and it's going to be like that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, got one right here, Mike.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation tonight. Really
Sure, thank you.
enjoyed it. One question, two questions hand in hand. When you were talking about the billing, how does your learning curve with new techniques and stuff come into the billing? As if it took me an hour to learn this, where my next case I'll be able to do that in 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And the other part is same basic idea, but how did you transition from film to digital?
Well, that's a great story in and of itself. But the first question is about using the learning curve, I guess, and how much you bill for that. If it's something that is really unique that I'll probably never do again, then I don't have any problem with billing the whole thing. I'd never bill the whole thing because I figure I need to know some of this stuff. But now there are always new techniques and there's new things to do. I have no problem with billing for that. But if it's something I do routinely, then I charge the routine price. Like for instance, with the rotating lug nuts on that, now I have a much better idea how I would still have to go do it and figure it all out, and each time is going to be different. So it's not going to be that big a difference as far as the learning curve. But I might get there a little bit quicker. So while I'm sort of thinking about some of that stuff, if it's really unique, I'll bill for at least a good part of it. If it's something that I feel should have been sort of routine, then I don't. So I just kind of make a judgment call and trying to be as fair as possible. And if I err, I'm going to err on the side of costing me instead of the client. And your second question is, with film, I started off, I shot film for years and years. And with digital, I started off with, I guess it was 99, I think. I started off with a sort of a point-and-shoot digital because they didn't even really have DSLRs at that time. And then Nikon came out with their D1, which is the very first digital SLR camera, and it had a whopping 2.74 megapixels. And I thought, I'm not spending, at the time it was like $7,500 for the camera plus, and I could use the same lenses, but I thought, I'm not going to do it for 2.74 megapixels. It's going to increase pretty quickly, which it did. 2 years later, I bought a D1X, and which was a whopping 6 meg or 5.9 megapixel. But that was high res back then. But I wanted to learn how to do it, so I shot film and digital for a little while, and not very long though, and I realized there's a lot I can do with digital that I couldn't do with film. And so, because I had already known Photoshop, because I was already scanning film and doing things with Photoshop. So I thought, oh, this is so much better. And by 2000, I had gotten rid of every piece of film camera stuff I ever had, and been 100% then too. When we used to teach photo workshops, even in the Smokies, we spent most of the time with these big light tables, and everybody's looking at their slides on the light tables. And we used to have overnight slide processing. First, we could do it right where we were in Townsend, and then that closed, and it was Gatlinburg, and that closed, and Knoxville, and that closed, and by then it was mostly digital anyway. But I was the only one out of the 5 instructors that was shooting digital, so helping people along with that. And now I don't think we even had somebody shoot film for a long time. But it was just making a conscious decision. And I was one of those people, when it first came out, I thought, I'm not doing digital, I'm doing real photography, And, I've heard so many longtime pros say exactly the same thing, either in talks or in workshops, and every one of them is digital now too. So it's just going along with the flow. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Oh, you got one more? All right, last one. You got one more.
Hi, great presentation.
Well, thank you.
I'm really curious how you merged engineering with photography and to get to where you are now and do what you do.
Well, I have always loved photography. Even since when I was a kid, I had a little box Brownie, and back then film was really expensive, so it might take a year to go through a roll of 12, but I always liked that. I just thought photography, I think because of the technical nature of it, I think I was drawn to that as an engineer. And even as a kid, I guess I was sort of a geeky engineer too. But and so I've always liked that. And then when I was working in this field, I used both all the time. And I started going to every class that I could find about photography to really learn about it, because I just thought it was fascinating. And of course, I had an engineering degree, so I knew that part of it. And of course, I studied that stuff and go to all kinds of conferences and classes and things for the engineering part. But with the photography, I took everything. Like, I always joke that I don't take pictures of things that talk back, in other words, people. And so, but now I do, because now I come here and I usually take photographs of all the other events. So I'm getting used to that, and it's actually kind of fun. But I've tried every kind of photography that I know of. I even shot a couple of weddings for friends that I said, I'm not doing that, I'm not doing it. But just please try it. So I did it. But I studied the heck out of it. I read books, watched videos, I practiced and everything, and did okay. I just think photography is unendingly interesting. I learn something new about it all the time, and that's what, to me, keeps it interesting, is that there's a technical aspect to it, and you got to know the technical before you can do anything else. You can see the most beautiful sunset you've ever seen in your life, but if you don't know how to set your aperture and your shutter speed and don't focus right and you'll never get it. So it's really important to get all the technical issues right. And so I've loved that, and the same thing with Flash, really getting good with Flash. That was that was almost like trying something completely new. And just there's always something to work on and to improve. So I think that's what drives me on both of them. And I love doing both of them. So I'm lucky that I get to combine them in one job.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Tom. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Bruce.
Very interesting. And thanks again for coming. And hopefully we'll see you at the next program. Let's see. October 5th, we're going to have one. We're going to have Herb McCandless is going to be here for, as you guys may know, Mr. Four Speed is his nickname. So he'll be here talking about his days with Sox and Martin. So